Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 289 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review I'm going to be looking at a British rock band that I've actually covered before on the channel back in 2019, a band that's been noted by a lot of people as one of the most adventurous and one of the wilder bands to come out in modern rock music today. Whether it's in the underground or in the mainstream, it doesn't matter. These guys can pretty much stick out like a sore thumb in any sort of rock circuit you put them in, whether it be for post-punk or noise rock or indie music. They are definitely very distinct in what they do. I am, of course, talking about the band Black Midi. They first garnered a lot of critical acclaim off their 2019 debut album, Schlagenheim, which I reviewed the year it came out. And I'm here to review their sophomore record, which came out recently on May 28th, 2021. And the album is called Cavalcade. This album for me is definitely one of my most anticipated albums of the year because I loved their debut album Schlagenheim, even though I haven't really listened to that record much since, before COVID began, because it is definitely a very challenging record that demands your full attention. There's all kinds of crazy ideas and genres that the band pulls from on their record. They're one of those rock bands that I actually don't feel very comfortable lumping them in with like any particular scene, except they kind of fit in with sort of the current wave of British post-punk that is having itself quite a breakout year in 2021. But at the same time, they definitely don't sound like a post-punk band. They pull more from math rock as well as noise rock and a lot of what they do. And for this album, they've actually managed to become even more unpredictable and ambitious this time around by bringing in more elements of prog and jazz and funk. Essentially going on this album what Anthony Fantano called in his review of this album avant prog, which I think is a pretty accurate way to describe this album because there's some very interesting progressions and it's very in your face and there's some weird time signatures and the songs, as usual from Black Midi, are structured in a unique way. Just take the opening track, John L., as an example of this. This song was a fantastic teaser track for the record and immediately got me hyped to hear what the band was going to do, because the song is just so wild and so crazy. They go everywhere on this song, from one of the most memorable, if very odd, melodies I've heard this year, and this melody's been stuck in my head for a while. The it's just so distinctive and so catchy at the same time. Geordie Greep's vocals on there are definitely very haunting, and then there's even a point in the song where he sounds like this just demented ringmaster, and it's just so unsettling in that midsection as we hear the strings and the horns making a lot of noise. There's some feedback in there, but my favorite part of the track is actually the second half. After all the lyrics are finished, we have just this section where the band is basically just jamming out and making all kinds of interesting sounds. It's kind of one of those sections that I'm kind of, bobbing my head to, but at the same time just kind of vibing out to, because it sounds so smooth, even as everything from the guitars, the bass, the piano and the violin is just making all kinds of strange noises, and Morgan Simpson, the drummer, I think his beat keeps in time with all of that so incredibly well, which I think further cements him as my favorite member of Black Midi, because like his drums just drive all these songs just so well, and he's definitely one of the better rock drummers I've heard in recent years. The next track, Marlena Dietrich, is actually kind of takes a left turn in a way, goes for more of a ballad kind of concept where we have these very lush, beautiful strings, more acoustics on there. It's a little more atmospheric, and yet it definitely fits right in with Black Midi's usual kind of lore, and especially in that the lyrics are about something that I've never heard, like a single rock band, not even the weird ones that you'd find in the underground, write a song about the stage performer, Marlena Dietrich. And this story is just told so well, and I love the different progressions and the way certain instruments enter in the song. Like, it's definitely one of the surprisingly gorgeous Black Midi songs, and I gotta give the band credit for showing a little maturity here by showing that they can make music that is very intense and very kind of wild shot, but they can also make music that is just so beautiful but doesn't stray too far from what the band is known for doing best. Then they take you right back into the heat with the next track, Chondromalacia Patella, which is a pretty interesting, very Black Midi type of song title there. The beginning is pretty cool. It's got these twangy riffs, killer rhythm section, as well as these like just these just these layers of noise that sound so incredible and cathartic in a way. And then it transitions into a jazzier section before Giorde Grip starts singing with lovely pianos, very nice guitar and drum syncopation on there. Like the jazz influences, they've always kind of been there. I mean, they were definitely there on Schlagenheim, but they're even further refined on Cavalcade. Cavalcade, which I find very smart. And I'm gonna be real here. I have no idea what the song is about, and frankly, I don't know what really any of Black Midi's songs are about. I mean, if you've seen my review of Schlagenheim, you probably heard me try my best to comprehend the album lyrically, and I will say that album is a little easier to comprehend in terms of the lyrics, but this album, like, it's so nonsensical, and yet I'm actually completely okay with that, because, I mean, does anyone really emotionally connect with Black Midi, or do we all just enjoy what they're doing musically? I mean, not everyone would dig what they're doing. I mean, there are people out there that can't stand them, but but they're definitely a band that you can appreciate more for what they're doing musically, and instead of what Giorde Grip is trying to get across as a lyricist and a singer. The song has all kinds of very interesting sections throughout. Love the little touches of harp that come in midway through the song, and then it slowly but surely goes right back into the intensity of the beginning before it all dissolves into this wild and crazy, like, synth, kind of synth rock jam near the end that was totally unexpected, and yet it just the way that the song makes that transition into that one little section is just phenomenal and kicks so much ass. But even more kick-ass than that is the next track, Slow, which was also another teaser track, and this song definitely is arguably one of the coolest things I think Black Midi has ever composed. Like John L., this song also has another opening melody that's been stuck in my head for a while. Din 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 din. And like, you know, the twangy guitars I think sound great. The bass line has a very unique kind of melody to it. The drums I think carry it also well. We also have Cameron Picton's very subtle but also kind of eerie lead vocals that I think work so well over the song. I mean, even though he doesn't have the range that Giorde has, I think, you know, Giorde's vocals wouldn't fit as well on top of this track, considering how kind of unsettling the song kind of is. You kind of need a voice like his. It's like, slowly it dies, slowly, slowly, slowly. Like, you know, it just, you know, works so well over top of the jazz progressions that happen throughout with the pianos and incredible guitar solos on there as well. I also love the slightly more atmospheric transition it makes into that more chaotic section where the instrumentation is making all these progressions similar to something like Radiohead, but then you have this like that is just like that is just so like explosive and also a great moment of catharsis too, and then it just goes right into that lead melody. Like, it's very interesting how Black Midi songs, even though they're about the same length as normal songs, they literally feel like an opus, like some sort of big symphony boiled down to just 5 or 6 minutes, which is something I haven't really seen in a lot of rock music, you know, except stuff like Slint, which the band is very obviously influenced by. This song, it's definitely one of my favorite songs in Black Midi history, and probably one of my favorites of the year too. John L. and Slow are just Song of the Year contenders for me. Then we go into the second half with the song Diamond Stuff, which is actually a much more mellow kind of acoustic cut on the album, which Fantano did compare in his review to something out of Grizzly Bear's Yellow House. But it also, to me, kind of sounds like some really interesting horror movie score a little bit. You know, those horror movies where it's like all these acoustic, like harp-like instruments playing these very tense and kind of cold notes in a way. My one issue with the track, though, is it does take a little bit of time to get going. It kind of drags on a little bit in the first half. Plus, Cameron Picton's vocals don't sound quite as interesting on the song as they did on Slow. Like, you know, it kind of fits with the vibe of how eerie the instrumentation sounds, but it just sounds kind of tepid to me. The ending of the song, though, I do think is quite cool. Great drumming in there. I love the atmosphere created by the guitar and the organ, and I think I even heard like this really eerie like choir at the end as well, sort of creating these little ghost-like layers. This is kind of probably my least favorite track on the record because the way it's structured just feels kind of clunky, and it's oddly enough one of the less interesting songs on the record. Luckily, though, the last 3 songs I think finish off this record on a high note. Dethroned is definitely one of the more straightforward tracks on the record, and yet the song just goes so hard, and yet there's really nothing like this song. I mean, incredible drumming on there. I think I think the melodies are really strong. Awesome climax on there. Giorde delivers very passionate vocals, and also some of those melodies like the song just flat out go so hard. And then the next track, Hogwash and Balderdash, another song that has a very Black MIDI song title to it, is just 2.5 minutes of just straight chaos. So, straight chaos with these kind of exotic melodies to it. This runaway bass melody, the do-do-do-do-do-do-do, to these manic layers of horns and noise, and maybe even a little bit of synth as well. And Giorde just, rattling off vocally. The song does have a little bit of time to breathe, like in the midsection, with some midsection where things get a little more atmospheric and lovely, and you really get to hear the nuances in the vocals this way, which is really cool. Before, for the last minute or so, it's just straight back into the fire, straight back into the hellfire. But what I really like about this track is that even though it's 2.5 minutes and clearly is very intense, just how interesting and intricate the song feels. Like, it's a song that may be only 2.5 minutes, but it feels like 5 minutes because of just all the different places that it goes to. And then we close things off on a pretty fittingly ambitious note with Ascending Forth, which is this 10-minute epic that never loses my interest because it goes to all kinds of places that are just so compelling. It starts out kind of this very progressive indie folk ballad for the first couple of minutes. Then we start hearing more organ, and then the drums enter so smoothly, and we start going into this progressive jazz where we're hearing more saxophone. And then near the middle, everything drops out, and you're getting the guitar and some strings that also sound very lovely. It's definitely sounds in a way kind of like a sequel to the Marlena Dietrich song. Only difference is this time around, songwriting wise, it very cleverly uses ascending fourths and stuff like that as metaphors for something in our lives that we just kind of wait for all the time. Like something, exciting to happen or something like that. Great solos throughout the song. The saxophone solo in the middle is phenomenal, and also the just how layered all the instrumentation sounds. And you can tell that just about every instrument we've heard on this record gets used and gets, showcased in a very shining way for this one epic opus at the end. And Giordi's storytelling and vocals just sound so engaging for the entire 9-minute and 53-second run. And just as you would expect, it has this very satisfying climax with the horns playing all these high notes and everyone just going nuts and then the song ends and I thought it was very smart to end the album with every instrument you've heard playing one last long note, finishing it off kind of like a show or an opus, like a bit of an end, a bit of the end moment, if you will, to finish off this truly very remarkable experimental rock record. So yeah, I absolutely loved this album. It's a pretty big contender for my favorite album of 2021 so far, because it's one of those albums where some albums you listen to, they get a little boring by the time you get to the 5th listen, because it's kind of like, I get it. I get what you're doing. I don't need to hear any more of it. But this album, this is one of those albums I've come back to quite a bit in the last few weeks, because I just discover something new every time I press play on it. Like, it's one of those albums that's just so easy to revisit for that reason, even if it isn't super accessible, and I would argue even less accessible than their debut, which is, so it's kind of understandable why some people seem to prefer Schlagenheim over this, but I just think Cavalcade is so much more refined, a little more interesting as well. Like, it kind of felt like on their debut, as much as I loved it, they were just kind of being weird to be weird. But like on this album, the weirdness actually has a little more, purpose, and it's one of those albums that, it's one of those albums that's, never, so that's never predictable or boring every time you press play on it. Like, you could listen to this album maybe, 10 times, listen to this album like, 10 times, and never get bored, and always find something interesting that you may not have noticed on the listen before. So definitely a 9 out of 10 for me. Not so sure if I'd say it's a light or a strong 9, but either way, it's still a 9 out of 10 regardless, because this album is amazing, and hopefully, if you enjoyed their debut, I definitely imagine you'd really like this. If you weren't into them before, I don't know how you'd feel about this record. However, even though I've heard some people who weren't super into their debut actually say this is an improvement, but yeah, like, absolutely check out this record. One of the most interesting and ambitious rock albums of the year. That's my review of Cavalcade, the new album from Black Midi, and I'll see you for episode 290.